What's that like? What's going on out there, people? Hey, it's another episode of the What's That Like podcast. I am your host, John Knowles. So baseball season has arrived. It's Cubs versus Cards, Cards versus Cubs. Today, I'm going to bring you a guest that's going to really talk about his passion, not only for his Cubs, but baseball in general. I know many of you grew up wanting to play pro ball. You maybe played in the high school a little bit, maybe played just in Little League, but as you've grown into an adult, you still maintain a passion for baseball to this day. Maybe the dream got away from you. Maybe it's just something that you thought you'd do when you were younger and it fell by the wayside, and now you're later in life and you're kind of wishing about what could have been. Tim Boostrom's a friend of mine from Mascoutah. He's had that dream. He wanted to play pro ball, and he never got that chance. But as he's gotten a little bit older in life and has a few more bucks in his pocket, he's found a way to make that dream come true. You see, Tim, every January, goes to baseball fantasy camp. And now, as a Cub fan, he goes to the Cubs baseball fantasy camp, and that's out in Mesa, Arizona. I'm pretty sure the Cardinal facility is in Jupiter, Florida. These baseball camps are available for any of the major league teams out there. You can pay a fee and go live out your major league dreams. But that's really only part of the story. You see, what I think you're going to hear in this podcast that you'll probably enjoy even more than what he talks about going through from a playing standpoint. It's the camaraderie and the relationships he's built with some of his childhood heroes, the Cub players, and then also just the crazy behind-the-scenes stories that these guys tell about each other and maybe some of their own former teammates in years past. So with that, I'll shut up. I'm going to talk to Tim Boostrom about baseball fantasy camp and ask him, what's that like? Tell me about little Timmy growing up.
Oh man, little Timmy was a huge Cubs fan at about the age of 5. Both my parents are from the Chicago suburbs, so all my family's from there. So living in central Illinois at the time, you're either a Cub fan or a Cardinal fan. Mm-hmm. And so with the family all being from Chicago, my allegiance went that way, which incidentally, there was no baseball fans in my family. So I just kind of enjoyed the game, played a little League, and thought I got to have an allegiance to a major league team. So I picked the Cubs because of the family, and it's stuck with me ever since.
How long did you play baseball growing up? Did you play in high school?
Yeah, I played 1 year in high school. Wasn't good enough to keep playing. Once they started throwing curveballs, my career was over. And but yeah, I loved playing up to that point. Felt like like any little kid, you feel like you could probably make the majors someday, and then that dream dies about the age of 14. So that was when I knew that was not going to be my career, and I probably needed to study a little harder.
Did you play any other sports?
I played football, but
yeah.
that was not a sport that you had to make the team. So playing is probably something I should use in air quotes. But
you were on the team.
I was part of the team. I was mostly a tackling dummy. Did get 1 sack in high school that was credited to somebody else.
You're like Rudy.
Yeah, kind of like Rudy.
Yeah, you got in the game at the end and sacked the quarterback, and then.
But then he got credit for it and got carried off the field. Somebody else's name was in the paper the next day, so it was not exactly like Rudy.
Not exactly like Rudy at all. So how old are you now, Tim?
I turned 40 about a month ago.
40. I gotta tell you, I've got I want to say there's 4 or 5 friends of mine, or turned 40 or turning 40. In the last probably 3 months. I guess all my friends are turning 40. It makes sense. My wife says I'm probably immature for my age. So I'm at 46. I'm hanging out with all you young
wife is
punks.
very perceptive.
She is.
Yes.
I am the oldest of her 3 kids.
That's great.
You're a Cub fan your whole life. You're 40 years old. Just this last fall, they finally win the first World Series, not only in your lifetime, but your dad's lifetime, your grandfather's lifetime, and anyone that's alive's lifetime. How tortured were you?
Yeah, it's funny. As a Cubs fan, you're not. It's more of a family feel where because you've been watching a loser for so long, it just becomes part of who you are. You're just having a good time watching ball. You have hope that maybe this is the year. That the torture was in the years like in '89 and and 2003 and years where they got close but they didn't get it. This particular year, they've been losing for so long intentionally to get the draft picks and get better that when they got to the World Series, it was enough. Cubdom was, this is good enough. We just wanted to get there. It hasn't been there since 45.
Yeah.
Now, when you get to Game 7, it's not enough. I mean, now you're like, okay, we want to win this thing. And that was a gut-wrenching night. But clearly it worked out for Cubdom, and I feel a little bad for Cleveland. Not a whole lot, but a little bit.
Now, I'm not a Cubs fan. Never have been. Diehard, bleed red Cardinal fan. I was rooting for you. I was rooting for you. You and all my Cub fan friends, except a couple of them.
Did you get kicked out or any sort of penalties in Cardinal Nation for that?
Not really, because I think, you always talk about these Cardinal-Cub rivalries, right? Mm-hmm. And they also, it's one of the greatest rivalries in baseball. It's been my contention for years that hammers don't have rivalries with nails. so you got to win every now and then to make it something real. So who were your Cubby heroes growing up?
Yeah, so as a 40-year-old, my formative years are in the 80s, and so you're watching, Cubs like Ryne Sandberg and Rick Sutcliffe, Bobby Dernier, Gary Matthews. And the 1984 team would be the way to describe that. They went to the NLCS that year. And then in 1989, the Cubs had a good team again. That's when they started the divisions, and they had wild cards and things like that. So the Cubs were a wild card team that year, and they had Sean Dunston and still Ryne Sandberg, Andre Dawson. Some of these, Mark Grace, these names of folks that a lot of people know. Greg Maddux was there.
Sure.
So just all those folks were people that I looked up to. I think when you think of idols, like when you're a kid and you idolize someone, it's probably when you're pretty young, and you just start to have people that you really like when you get a little bit older. So the 84 team are ones that I idolized. Ryne Sandberg was somebody that I would have loved to spend 5 minutes with. I would, made your year. Mm-hmm. So that would have been my team. Just like I think for you it would be Ozzie Smith and Willie McGee and the gang.
That's right. Yeah, yeah, certainly. Those were as an older guy, I watched the Cardinals today, and yeah, they've got good players, but they don't sink into you like they did when you were 8 to 15 years old, and those guys were like, oh my God, it'd be so cool to meet them.
Yeah.
So you're a Cubby fan. You've got your Cubby heroes.
Mm-hmm.
A couple of years ago, I remember you and I talking, and you told me you were off to fantasy camp.
That's right.
And explain what fantasy camp is. Because actually, Tim, when I told somebody I was having somebody on the pod to talk about fantasy baseball camp, they thought you were just going to go to camp and play fantasy baseball.
Oh, okay.
So what do you get when you tell people you're going to fantasy camp?
You got to be careful with the way you word that. So if you tell a female that you're going to fantasy camp, they may turn around and go the other direction because it may sound something inappropriate. Mm-hmm. Or it may sound like you're going to be joining a convention of other people dressed up like characters from Lord of the Rings. But what fantasy baseball camp is a chance for you to pretend to be a baseball player for a week. All the major league teams have this camp now, so you can for an entire week just go down to their spring training facility, put on the uniform, and play baseball. At
what point do you decide this is something I want to do?
So I was in my 20s and I was watching a Cubs game, and they came on with a promo that said Randy Hundley's baseball camp. And Randy Hundley was a catcher for the Cubs in the 60s. Todd Hundley's dad, for folks that knew Todd from playing in the 90s. And I said, fantasy camp, what is this thing? So I get on the internet and check it out, and sure enough, you get to play baseball for a week with Cub players, the guys that you grew up watching. And I thought, I got to be part of this. I don't know what this is, but I got to be a part of this. And you had to be at least 30 years old to do it. So being in my 20s and not having the income to, it's just an expensive proposition. So not having the money to do it and not being old enough yet, I thought, someday I'm going to do this. And then, life gets in the way and things happen where you spend your money on other things, and all of a sudden you wake up one day in your late 30s and you think, I better do this now before I can't do it, physically.
Right. So tell me the setup. How does it work? Where is it at?
Yeah, so it's at the Cubs spring training facility, which is in Mesa, Arizona, just outside of Phoenix, and you play on the fields that they practice on in spring. So if you watch any reports of your favorite team practice on the practice fields.
From the Cactus League,
right? Or the Grapefruit League in Florida, right? You're playing on their fields, the same fields that they practice on. And then they have a big game, they call it, at the end of the week where you play against the professionals. Mm-hmm. And that's in the actual spring training facility that they play their games in.
Are you showing up prior to spring training, or is it after?
Yeah, it's in January, late January, so it's before spring training, a couple weeks usually beforehand.
So tell me how it works. I mean, you show up, like on a Sunday?
Yeah, you fly in on a Sunday and go to an opening ceremony where you meet the players, which will be your coaches for the week. And they sort of draft the teams. I mean, they kind of know in advance who's going to be where, but you don't know. So maybe Rick Sutcliffe stands up at the front and he says, okay, I got Boostrom on my team. Boostrom, where you at? And you get up and you jog up there, and there's a mediocre applause for you because nobody cares who Boostrom is from the St. Louis area. And then it'll be like Kozlowski, and he runs up to see you and meeting all these other guys and gals that are going to be on your team.
Okay. So it's not a schoolyard pick. You're not standing around going, oh, that guy looks like he's got an arm.
You fill out a form ahead of time. This is how the Cubs camp works anyway. You fill out a form that they ask you, how much ball did you play growing up, and how old are you, and what position do you want to play. So I think they take a look at those things and sort of try to even out the teams. But every year somebody makes a mistake because there's at least one team with a number of guys that are too old or a little too heavy or not enough experience, and they at least have the positions figured out, or they got two guys that want to play catcher on every team. But you can usually tell that opening night, that team's going to be probably going to go 0 for the week.
All right, so you mentioned two guys that want to be a catcher, and I also think about pitching. I mean,
yeah.
I coach my son's 14U baseball team, and if I go throw batting practice to those guys for an hour in the cage, I'm dying.
Right.
You're not pitching.
No,
are you?
I was worried about that because when I first looked into the camp, they didn't describe that. There was no pictures of how that worked. So I thought, I'm going to go out there, and are these guys going to be throwing to us, or going to get walked the entire time? And they use pitching machines.
Okay.
So during the week, the ball's coming pretty much the same spot, same speed every time. And the end of the week when you play against the pros, it is live pitching. So someone on your team has to throw to them, and they have to throw to you.
So there's a guy behind the plate catching, squatted down in gear too?
Yeah, there's a bucket where they just catch the ball, drop the ball into the bucket, whatever. So usually by about the middle of the week, they're sitting on the bucket. So,
I was going to say, I'd have to sit on the bucket.
Yeah. Because generally, the guy playing catcher, let's be honest, is not probably the most athletic guy in your team. So he might be, a few dozen pounds overweight, and he's just like, you know what? Flip the bucket over. I'm going to put on the gear and sit back here.
So you get there on a Sunday. You have an opening ceremony. I guess, do you train Monday and if you're for a couple days, or what? How does that go?
Yeah, that's so that you want to play as much as you can. So although there is some practice and some coaching, it's pretty minimal. I mean, you're pretty much just thrown in the deep end of the pool. So Monday comes up. You go over to the facility. You get in the locker room, which is really cool because you're in the players' locker room. You got your nameplate over your locker that they end up all signing by the end of the week, and your jersey's hanging up there with your name on it. And that's a moment that for the first timers is off the charts.
Yeah.
You're thinking about the fact that the players that are currently playing are in these lockers, and you got your jersey with your name on it. It's surreal. So you see all the first timers, including myself, my first year, take a picture of that and just sit there and kind of just take it in.
Yeah.
So then after that you get changed. You go to a morning meeting. And the coaches are there telling you kind of how things are going to work. And then they tell a bunch of stories of, their playing days, some off-the-record stuff or what, just great stuff. And then you get on the fields, do some calisthenics, and they take some hitting practice. So they bring the little cage out, and you take 8 or 10 swings. And maybe if you're making contact, they don't give you much advice. If you're swinging through it, they're like, move your elbow over here or stand like this or whatever. So get a little bit of advice. They take a few fielding, grounders and pop-ups and things. And then it's time to play.
Tell me what kind of people are there. I mean, you're 40. You wanted to do this for a while. Mm-hmm. You said the minimum age is 30. How do they balance that out? I mean, what's the age range of folks that are there?
Yeah, I would say the average age is probably 55. So it's not a bunch of youngsters by any means. And the average skill set is not that strong either. I mean, there's a few guys you can tell played in high school or maybe even minor league ball. But for the most part, it's guys like me. Played a little bit of baseball growing up and just wanted to get in there and play. So it's not you wouldn't have to worry about your talent level. There's folks that literally have never played baseball before. There was a gal from Japan that didn't speak English, never played baseball, but was a Cubs fan. She came out and played, and by the end of the week, she was hitting the ball.
Well, that's cool.
Yeah, so it's all ages, all types. That when you're making these great plays and you think in your head like how cool a play might be. Like for example, there was a play where I'm going to say dove in the hole, which after you watch it on video, it looks more like he kind of stumbled and caught the ball. But in your head, you dove in the hole, you make this play, and then I threw the guy out from my knees to first, which that part is legitimate. But you're not throwing out Willie McGee, even though you think you are in your head. You're throwing out like William McDougall, the OBGYN from Milwaukee. Like he's takes him 10 seconds to get to first, but it feels good when you do it.
So what you mentioned that's a favorite play you had. What are the favorite playing moments that you had?
Yeah, there's a couple. So you're going out there to pretend to be a baseball player for a week, and part of that fantasy is to play with the professionals. So we had 1 year, and I've done this for 3 years. So the second year, we had Fergie Jenkins was going to be one of our coaches, and he's a Hall of Fame pitcher for the Cubs, for those that don't know. And he couldn't make it. He got snowed in and it couldn't make it in January. So we had one coach for the whole week. Well, Friday rolls around, Thursday night rolls around, and there's a rumor that Ryne Sandberg is going to show up. Hall of Fame second baseman, my hero growing up. Everybody's hero that's at this camp to some degree. And we thought, well, hey, we're down a Hall of Famer. Maybe we could ask for him. And so we went to Randy Hundley, who runs the camp, and said, hey, could we get Sandberg if he shows up tomorrow? He says, yeah, it'd be great. Sure enough, he shows up. So the next day, the whole camp is buzzing because he's there and he's telling stories, but he's our coach. So I'm sitting in the dugout on the bench with Ryne Sandberg, and we're telling stories and talking about baseball, and then you're going up and hitting, and he had to play that day in the field because we had a couple guys that were hurt. By Friday, you're playing double headers every day.
Okay.
So I don't care if you're a professional player, double headers every day is a lot. And so by Friday, there's people with pulled hamstrings and groins and stuff, and so he's playing first base, and I'm playing shortstop that day. So I'm like taking grounders and throwing them to Ryne Sandberg.
That's crazy.
That's exactly what you dream about growing up, is to play ball with your heroes.
14-year-old Tim just came back to life.
That's what this whole thing's about, right? So you're a kid all over again. You're not thinking about your job. Selfishly, you're not even thinking about your family or your friends. You're just selfish for an entire week playing ball with your heroes. And so there was a play where two plays that I remember in this. One was a grounder went to second base, and the guy playing second had never played baseball before this week. Looked exactly like Harry Connick Jr., by the way. And in the evenings, we even had him telling people he was Harry Connick Jr., and it went over really well at the bars and stuff. But he takes the ball off his chest, the grounder, and it pops up in the air. I catch it, step on second, throw to first. And Sandberg gives me a little, fist pump, and I come in, and he says, great play. And I'm thinking, Ryne Sandberg just told me I made a great play. Did anybody hear that? Did you just record that? So that was moment number one. And then I came up to bat the next inning and hit one out, hit a home run, which it's a fairly rare thing. Like, there's a handful of home runs that'll get hit throughout the week. Usually it's one guy hitting two or three of them because he's just a monster. Or like we had a guy on our team that played college ball, so he was cranking a couple. But it's a pretty rare occurrence, and so it's the only one I've ever hit out. And when I get around third base, Sandberg's coaching third. I didn't even think about it. He gives me a high five. He's like, heck of a hit. And so I come in, tap the plate. The team's all there giving me high fives and stuff, and they go, how did that feel? I said, I just hit a home run. And Ryne Sandberg told me, heck of it, I'm going home. Like, that was the camp. That's the fantasy. I just did it. It's over.
It's over.
Right.
And now you're chasing that feeling year after year going back. Yeah.
So, I even told my wife, she said, you got to go back. You have so much fun. I said, I don't know if I can go back. Now, in the third year, it won't be as fun. It doesn't matter. It was still as amazing. Sandberg wasn't there. It didn't matter. It was still the most cool week. It's something if you're a baseball fan at all, you got to do this with your team. It's unbelievable.
So the Cubs are kind of famous for having famous fans. And, you mentioned Bill Murray might have showed up. Do you see folks that show up to this thing?
Yeah. Just to be fair to them, you end up it's so surreal. You end up kind of becoming friends with some of these folks. You actually are friends with some of them, and so one of the things they tell you at the beginning of the week is that don't put the stuff on Facebook, don't Twitter out that so and so's here, and so we try to respect that. But some of the fans find out somehow anyway, and so you'll have 5 people watching your games at the beginning of the week, like somebody's wife and their kids, and by the end of the week there's 100 people watching because they're all waiting for one of the celebrities. So yeah, there's musicians and movie stars and things like that.
So I guess first rule of Cubs Club is don't talk about Cubs Club.
Yeah, probably. There's a number of things you probably shouldn't repeat. Evening activities and things like that. Yeah.
So, that was my next question. What happens at night? You've played doubleheaders all day. You're beat up, you're sore. You're doing this for 4 or 5 days in a row. You're all in the same hotel, right?
Yeah. So they get a kind of a modest hotel. It's inexpensive, and there's a pool and a hot tub out there. So they put a hospitality tent in between the two, and they have drinks and snacks and stuff. So after the games, you'll generally go out to dinner on your own or with some of the campers or your family, and then you'll come back and you hang out at the hospitality tent until you're tired of hanging out there. But sometimes it's an all-night thing where people are just having a good time, having a few drinks, and swapping baseball stories with Willie Wilson or Rick Russell or Rick Sutcliffe or whoever's out there, and that's generally the evening activities. But yeah, because of the soreness, there's a masseuse that's on staff there that you can hire, and it gets booked up pretty fast.
Yeah.
If you don't sign up the first week, you end up going to some local masseuse because you just can't even get in. In fact, some of my favorite memories of this camp is that they have trainers that will work out your hamstring. The same trainers the Cubs players use, work out your hamstrings or put ice on stuff. Before the first game, people are in the trainer's room. I mean, just think of the age of the people. You're like, oh, hey, I'm just sore in general, so I'm going to go get some work done before I start playing.
It was a long flight, got a crick in my neck.
Right.
Now you got to play 5 straight days of baseball.
By the end of the week, it smells. The whole place is Bengay. Like there's a Bengay convention going on. It's unbelievable what the smell is like.
Man, you're selling up this fantasy camp.
Well, there's a limited number of slots, so if a few people just get scared away by the smell of old man, then that's probably good for the rest of us.
But if you're a younger guy like yourself, you're probably on the younger end of folks. You go there and probably dominate.
Well, yeah, and that is really fun. So if you're 40 years old, you played a little bit of baseball, you look like a Hall of Famer out there. I mean, you're making – like I remember jumping up and making a catch that in any co-ed softball league would be just okay, nice catch. So I jump up at the top of my leap, which is, not a pretty – maybe a 1.5 foot vertical. So I make this catch. I come down, and Willie Wilson says, "That was awesome. I can't believe you got that high." I said, "It was like 1.5 feet." And he goes, "No, for this camp, it was pretty amazing."
So name drop for me a little bit. You don't want to talk about the celebrities, but I'm sure part of the selling of this is you're going to hang out with former Cubs players.
Sure.
Take me through like who were your coaches, who were some of the other name drop some of the other folks that maybe you're running into here and hanging out with.
Well, so in 3 years, a lot of the folks like to come back. So if you think of this is not just a ton of fun for the campers. The pros have a great time coming to this thing. They're competitive, so they get a chance to kind of trash talk with their compadres about their team beating the other team or whatever. But they also really just enjoy the relationships they have with the campers, which I would have never have guessed. Like, for example, Rick Russell, who played for 20 years, a bunch of different teams. I was driving him back from the facility to the hotel one day. He just needed a ride. And I said, "Hey, thanks for doing this. Like, that's just thanks for coming out. You have no idea how cool this is for us as the campers." And he goes, "No, don't even worry about it. This is fun for us. Like, we get a chance to meet all you guys and see how much fun you're having. It just reminds us why we enjoyed playing the game so much." And so they have just as much fun as we do, which is hard to believe, but it's really, really cool. But names, Rick Sutcliffe, he's a great pitcher, Cy Young winner. He's on ESPN now.
ESPN, yeah.
Right, Sandberg I mentioned, Fergie Jenkins, Hall of Famer. Billy Williams has been there in the past. Ron Santo was there before he passed away. Everybody from the '84 teams, like Gary Matthews and Bobby Dernier and
Durham.
Durham's been there in the past. I've not. Jody Davis was there last year. He's super cool. You meet all these guys and they're just as great as you thought. Now some of the guys are a little tougher to get along with, and Lee Smith can be kind of standoffish, but it's just his personality. He's just a quiet guy. He's not. Standoffish isn't the way to say it. He's just not generally an outgoing guy. Mm-hmm. But if you sit down and talk to him, like I went up to him. He was our coach the first year, and I said, "Lee, like you've been sitting in the other dugout the whole week. We're barely seeing you. Why don't you come out and hang out with us?" He goes, "What do you want from me, man?" Or he said, "Boostrom, what do you need?" And I said, "I don't know. Show me how to throw like a curveball or slider or something." So he grabs my hand, and his hand is easily twice the size of my hand. And he says, "Damn, white boy, you're not going to be able to throw a curveball? Your hands are too small." And I was like, "Well, what can I throw?" He's like, "I'll show you how to throw a slider." So he shows me how to throw it, and the second time I threw it, it cut. It was amazing. It was incredible. So now I get to tell everybody, "Hey, Lee Smith showed me how to throw my slider."
You're a 2-pitch pitcher now. You got a change up and a slider.
That's right. Yeah, good for you. Yeah, my heater, my 70-mile-an-hour heater is, barely a changeup.
Did they tell any good stories, maybe baseball or otherwise, that maybe you want to share?
Yeah. So, like I said, in the mornings they do the morning meeting is kangaroo court. So for those that don't know what that is, it's the teams will fine each other, like players will fine each other for making mistakes, and throw money into the kitty. And I don't know what they do in the pros with that money, but in the camp they give it to a charity that we all decide on ahead of time. So let's say a guy goes up to home plate and he's not wearing a helmet. It's $5 that goes in the kitty, and or we've had a guy go up there with his chest protector on still from playing catcher, and like, what are you doing? That's $10. But yeah, so you find people, and then after the fines are all decided, they might compliment. They go over the games of the day before and say, "Oh, so and so had 5 RBIs yesterday," and they give them a hand or whatever. But then they get into storytelling, and primarily it's to kill some time so the fields can kind of dry up and the sun can come out. But it's also it's some of the best time of the entire week is those mornings. They tell stories that are not the baseball stories that it's baseball behind the scenes. It's like a 30 for 30 on comedic baseball. So they'll tell a story about Goose Gossage mud wrestling in Yuma, Arizona in the minor leagues, which is a phenomenal story that I can't repeat. And they tell you, don't tell these stories, don't repeat these stories because they don't want to get out, But there's a couple that I could share that we'll just leave the names out, and they're good. So for one, there was a pitcher that had decided he had a pregame routine where he'd eat the same thing every day, but for whatever reason, he decided to eat Mexican food one day before starting a game. And it didn't work out. So his stomach's turning while he's on the mound. And he's, when you throw, you really put everything into it. You use a lot of muscles, right? So he hurled a ball in there and had a problem. He had some
explosive.
He had explosive challenges.
Yes.
He realized it. Now this is it's on TV, right? And there's fans and there's players and stuff around. So he's worried that people are going to notice this at some point. So he quickly gets back up on the mound, gets ready, throws the next pitch, and intentionally overthrows and tumbles to the ground so that he falls on the seat of his pants, and he kind of rubs around a little bit in the dirt to sort of cover up the mistake. But it didn't work. So they figured out what he was doing and ended up even talking about it on the broadcast. In between innings, he handled the problem, but I thought that was a fantastic story, and it'd be fun if you knew who it was. And then another great story is one of the players, I think in the 60s or 70s, he's in the minor leagues and doesn't speak barely any English. And he's trying to make his way up. I think he's from Cuba. And he's every time he got up against this one particular hitter on another team, the guy would hit him every time. And the guy had it out for him. And so he was getting frustrated, and he didn't know what to do about it. You're in a foreign country. You haven't been in there very long. Somebody's hitting you constantly with the baseball. You don't understand. Is it a cultural thing? Like, what's going on? So he goes to one of his buddies and says, so what should I be doing about this? And the guy says, take a knife to with you, and the next time he hits you, charge them out and pull the knife out. And he's like, really? That's what you do? He's like, yeah, he'll never do it again. So he does. So he puts a pocket knife, like a switchblade, I think, in his back pocket. Gets up to the plate. The guy smokes him, and he runs out to the mound. Now, this guy is, 6'5", 2 something. I mean, not the Cuban player. He's a small guy. The guy's hitting him is huge. That's why he never charged the mound, because he couldn't take care of it. So he runs to the mound, and the big guy's ready to take him, and then he flips out the knife, and the guy turns around and literally runs away towards center field. So the hitter's like, what do I do now? So he chases him. So he runs after him into center field, and the pitcher runs all the way to the wall and then jumps the wall. And he literally leaves the field of play. So the hitter is now think about, you're this guy that some friend convinced you got to take a knife, you got to handle this. So now you're a baseball player. You've ran all the way to center field with a knife, and you're like, now what? So he turns around, and the entire team, that guy's team, the pitcher's team, is coming after him. He turns around, they realize he's got a switchblade, and they start freaking out, and they run back the other way. So he goes, well, I guess I'd chase them. So he runs after them, chases them all the way into the dugout. This is during a game, an actual baseball game. Chases them all the way to the dugout. They finally take the knife from him, and this incident is over. Now, he told that story in consecutive years to us. The first time, that's all we heard, and everybody's laughing, and it's just it's hilarious. Nobody got hurt. It's just funny. The second year he told the story, someone asked the question that I wanted to ask, which was, what happened next? Did you ever face this guy again? Did he plunk you again? The pitcher quit baseball. After that incident, he left. He didn't even play ball anymore. So he literally scared him out of baseball. And the guy that took the knife out spent one night in jail.
Wow.
Yeah. Great stories. And
I'm speechless. I mean, it just sounds to me like you have such a good time out there. I'll never forget it. I'm driving home this year. Mm-hmm. And I'm driving home in the car, and I don't text while I drive, kiddies. But on the phone, it pops up, and I couldn't help but look over, and it says, I just hit a triple over blankety blank's head.
Yeah. Yeah, there's a...
I mean, you said you don't want to name names. Pearl Jam.
There's a famous Cub fan that's been in, if you're watching any of the playoff games, who's a musician.
He's there a lot.
Sometimes.
Pearl Jam.
Right. And, it was cool. So for those that watched Game 7, which I don't care if you're a Cub fan, Cardinal fan.
It was awesome.
Yeah, unbelievable baseball game. And at the last out was a little chopper that went to third that the Cubs third baseman, Chris Bryant, went after, and he lost his footing. He picked the ball up, lost his footing, and threw it to first, ended up on his knees, and that was the final out of the World Series. And the place goes nuts and everything, right?
Rizzo puts the ball in his pocket.
You're right. So there was a game that we were playing against this particular individual that you're referencing, and it's his team, and I was at shortstop, and there was a ball that was trickled up the middle, similarly to the Chris Bryant ball. And similarly to Chris Bryant, I ended up on my knees throwing the ball to first. But Chris fielded the ball cleanly, threw and slipped, and ended up on his knees. I fumbled the ball a few times, kicked it, ended up picking it up, ended up tripping over myself, falling onto my knees and throwing the guy out. So totally different in my mind. Mine looked terrible. Even in my head, it looked terrible.
Yeah.
But as I'm coming off the field, this particular person came up to me and said, "That was just like Chris Bryant winning the World Series," and he gave me a high five. And I'm like, all right. I mean, whatever.
There you go.
Yeah.
Hang
out with celebs, man.
That's the fantasy coming true.
Correct.
Question then to kind of follow this up. There's a saying out there. It's like never meet your heroes.
Never heard that saying.
Well,
is that a real saying?
It's a real saying. It's like never meet your heroes. You might be disappointed in what you come up with.
Sure.
So the idea of that hero might be different than really real life turns out to be. Has that been your experience at all?
That's a great question, John. I think that's fair in certain circumstances. So if you make these guys out to be bigger than life, if you're your 8-year-old version of these people in your head, then yeah, it can be. You might be disappointed because you think they're superheroes. But if you go into this realizing that this is just some guy that made a lot of money playing a game, and now he's invested in real estate in Mississippi, then you're just chatting with a guy that has some real estate in Mississippi that happened to play baseball when he's younger. Yeah. So if you go into the right attitude as an adult, it's great. If you were actually 14 years old doing this, it probably would be disappointing at times. But by all means, they're by and large great people, very engaging. They're happy to talk to you.
That's probably why
great.
they're there. You said Randy Hundley runs this. He probably weeds those folks that are just going to be not engaging out.
Yeah, I've heard stories. I mean, this has been going on for 35 years. There's guys that have gone to it for 32 of those years. And they'll tell you stories about one or two guys that are just awful, that are there, and then they just aren't there anymore. They're there for a year or two, and they don't come back.
Yeah. Let's boil it down. You said you waited a while till you could afford it. What's it cost?
So I don't know what the other camps cost. Cubs camp is $4,500-ish. It sounds like a lot, and it is, but it includes a ton of stuff. So, for example, your hotel is part of that. Your breakfast and your lunches are part of that. There's 3 dinners for that it's a week long. So there's 3 of those dinners. The opening night, there's a barbecue for you where you can bring your family and meet the players. And then there's an end of the week ceremony where they give out the trophies and signed autograph balls and stuff like that. So really, you're paying for a couple dinners on your own.
You get a jersey or your uniform?
Yeah. You get 2 jerseys. So you get a home and an away uniform. You get there's a couple gifts that they give you. And, the evenings, again, the snacks and drinks and stuff are all included. They videotape all the games. There's a photographer out there taking pictures. Some of that stuff's extra that you have to pay for, but they give you a lot of free stuff. And, so if you think about other than your flight and a couple of dinners and maybe some incidentals, so let's say you're in it for $5,500 for an entire week of playing baseball with your heroes on the spring training facility that your heroes play on. It's not bad at all.
Okay. Yeah. Do you keep in touch with any of those players? I mean, have you become friends with any of them?
Definitely the campers. They call it, people like me that are going to campers. So absolutely the campers we keep in touch. Like I'm going to be going to Chicago to catch a game here soon, and I sent an email to everybody and 3 or 4 others that are going. We're going to catch up. But yeah, some of the pros. Again, it's hard to tell the story without name dropping. So some of the pros, you have their cell phone numbers in your phone, and you can connect with them if you want. Your email addresses and things like that. But it's a fairly respectful environment. I think what's interesting about this week is, the first day or two, you're in awe. You're seeing, especially the first camp, you're seeing these guys that you saw on TV that were bigger than life, and you're thinking, I just want to get their autograph, or I just want to hang out with them and ask them what it was like. But by the third day, you're having lunch with the other campers, and you're learning about them, and the pros are just guys. Mm-hmm. And so you're not too much in awe of them during that week. Maybe 6 months into the year, you're thinking, it'd be fun to catch up with Bobby Dernier again. I wonder what he's doing. But for the most part, yes, you do become friends with them, which is at least acquaintances, especially if you go back year after year. But it's not the same. It's a fun environment. But
you've broken down. You said the cost is about $4,500, but not everybody there is a millionaire. You're not. I know you're not.
No.
So, I mean, it's just something you budget as a part of what you're going to have in terms of your own family's entertainment or whatever, and you've got a wife that thinks it's great that you go do that.
Yeah. No, the cost is a lot, as you're saying here. It's not a cheap thing. But the folks that attend are not all well-to-do. There are definitely some folks that have good jobs, doctors and lawyers and things like that. They come back year after year. But primarily you're talking about, a teacher that's retiring that somebody decides they're going to go together and get him this as a gift. Or there was a guy my age that his parents got this as I think it was like a master's graduation gift or something. One of my favorite people that I've seen each year, we've become friends, is a 67-year-old retired steel worker, and he got this as a gift his first year, and he comes back every year. He's just like, I didn't think I'd do this again, but I'm taking it out of my 401k, and I'm giving less to my kids, but I'm enjoying it. And,
live now.
Yeah, live now. And I think about this, 67 years old, he's faster than I am, and he's, pulling grounders and beating them out, and it's just fun to see him and everybody at those ages having a great time.
Is Steve Bartman there?
I've not met Steve Bartman. I don't think he's probably in Cub Nation much anymore. Incognito.
Had to ask, thought, maybe he's there.
Yeah.
The curse has been lifted.
Yeah, he should. Hey, Steve Bartman, if you're listening, we'd love to have you at Cubs camp. You'll have a good time. Well, you'll probably even sign some autographs. Come on out.
How about that? Yeah. Boostrom making the invite.
Yeah, I mean, it might be full. You might not get in, but keep trying.
I'm sure they'd make an exception for the guy. Poor tortured soul. I mean, he's a good guy. He didn't do anything any different than somebody else would have done.
Well, he might not be able to afford it given the Walkman that he had. He wasn't keeping up with the technology. It might have been from a cost standpoint.
That was 2003, Tim.
Yeah, it was pretty. It looked pretty outdated. I mean, even I have outdated technology, and I thought it was outdated. But
your Cub hat that you're wearing right now looks possibly that old.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
And
with those headphones you got on, you kind of.
Do I look a little like in studio Steve Bartman?
Steve Bartman with a beard.
Wow. Steve Bartman in the flesh.
Any other fantasies you want to live out at any other camps?
I have friends that are other baseball fans, obviously, Orioles or Cardinals or whatever, and as I've told them the stories, they just want to play. They want to do this. Everyone's like, oh, I got to save up the money and do this with my team. And I've told those folks, if you do that, I'll go with you. Like, so maybe I'd not do the Cubs camp that year and come do the Orioles camp or whatever it may be, because the experience should be essentially the same. But there is something about watching a first-time camper and how much joy they get out of it that just makes you so happy. So it would be fun to see my friends having the same fun. And plus, it's just nice playing ball with a buddy of yours versus random strangers that become buddies.
I got to imagine, growing up around here like we do in the weather and the fields, and you got the mixed grass and things are in and out. Just going out there on that perfectly manicured field in, what's the stadium the Cubs play in?
It's called Sloan Park.
Sloan Park. It's just got to be unbelievable. Everything's just perfect probably all day long.
It's Field of Dreams, the natural. When you see those movies where they editorialize, that's not the word, but they just make it look incredible. The movie,
it's cinematography.
Cinematic. There you go. So the thematic part of this, where you walk out and see the grass and it's glistening in the
early morning and the sprinklers going.
It's exactly that. I mean, exactly that. And but you also get the smells and the feeling of the sunlight on you, and so then you're down on the field warming up, and you're getting goosebumps, and you're in the dugout. This is the big game at the end of the week in Sloan Park.
Okay, we're at the big game at the end of the week.
Big game. You're going to be playing against the pros, and the format for it again is if you win third place. So there's 8 teams that play during the week of campers. If you end up in third place, you're playing the third inning. If you're first place, the first inning, that sort of thing. So you're excited. You can't wait for your inning to play against the pros. And the way the Cubs camp is set up, your entire lineup bats one time. They don't really even record outs. It's just you go, you hit 10 guys, 11 guys, whatever it is, you score as many runs as you can, inning's over. And then you try to get the pros out with traditional 3 outs. And then they play the whole 8 innings, in this case with 8 teams. And you try to beat them. And in the 35 years, the Campers have won one time, and it was under controversy.
It's still under review.
It's still under review.
So in this game, you come up as it now batting from Mascoutah, Illinois, Tim Boostrom.
Yeah, since nobody knows Mascoutah, so they do that, believe it or not, and you tell them how you want it to be said. So I just told them downstate Illinois, since everybody's familiar with Chicago, and they all call it downstate around here.
So Joliet is downstate.
Yeah,
so.
Springfield's downstate. So I just figured, just be downstate. No one's going to care.
Yeah.
I didn't want to say St. Louis, because I actually did. So Jason Hayward and Kyle Schwarber are current players, which, of course, Cardinal fans know Jason Hayward. They came to one of the morning meetings this last year just to I don't know, pep talk for the crowd, and the place is going nuts, rooting on the champs. And so I stood up and said, "Hey, Hayward, quick question. I'm from the St. Louis area," and I couldn't even get the rest of it out. Like, it was just boos and sit down and FUs, and it was unbelievable. But anyway, so I decided to not refer myself as the St. Louis guy anymore. So now I'm downstate Illinois guy. But anyway, so you line up on the lines, and they introduce you. You walk up, you tip your cap, and a PA guy introduces you. So it was Tim Boostrom, downstate Illinois, and then you go clap everybody's hands like they do in the All-Star game. And then they sing the national anthem, and the guy that does the opening day national anthem for the Cubs, Wayne Messmer, comes in and does the national anthem. So it really feels like a Cubs game, start of a game.
Yeah. What would you tell somebody that we haven't talked about so far about the experience?
So the experience, I think, in most people's heads is that big game. Like, for example, the first year I pitched to one hitter. We had a couple guys that took turns pitching, so I came in to get the last out. And I pitched to Todd Hundley, who, hit 40 home runs one year in the 90s. I mean, good player, and he's still fairly young. And so you're thinking, I'm on the mound in the facility that in about a month they're going to be playing games on, and I'm pitching to Todd Hundley here. It's surreal. I mean, those are the moments that you wait for. And incidentally, I did get him out.
Of course you did.
Which was great.
Yeah, or you wouldn't have told the story.
Yeah, I fired that 70-mile-an-hour heater in there, and he hit it about 400 feet, but it was foul. Then I decided I better bust him inside with one, so I ran one up and in, which, again, in my head sounds and looks really amazing, but on film, I think he was just really tired and wanted to go back and sit down. And so he just kind of flicked it and popped out to first. But
Did you use that Lee Smith slider on him?
I was gonna try that, and yeah. I did try it, but I can't tell you the nerves that you have. You think you can handle it, you get up on the mound, and some guys just can't throw anymore when they get on there. Yeah. So for me, with the slider, I overthrew it, and it was just terrible. So I went back to the heater. So for folks that are thinking about this, I would say that moment is what you're looking for, that opportunity to be on the mound, let's call it, or in the field against the pros. But as a kid, let's say you're 14, 15 years old, 16 years old, and you're not going to be a professional baseball player. When you go to a baseball game, you see them warming up before the game, throwing pitches to each other, just throwing to each other. Or you see them taking batting practice, and you think, I could never be a major league player, but I could do that. I could throw, with a pro. I could hit off of a pitching machine. And so when you actually get out there and get to do that, it's exactly what you dreamed of. That level of connection you could have had with Major League Baseball, you actually have it at that point. And that's that experience that if anybody listening is like, I really wish I could have done that one day, you can for like $4,500, and it's totally worth it.
Timmy, man, hey, I want to thank you for coming. I know there's plenty of Cub fans in this area that might get a kick out some of the stories you told, and hopefully, maybe someday you'll meet one of these folks, and they'll go, "Oh, you're Tim Boostrom from the What's That Like podcast." Yeah,
I mean, so this is great. I got two things for you before we sign off. One thing is, thanks for having me out here. The fantasy camp concept is just genius. To take a week just for yourself, I think everybody needs that. You think about City Slickers, the movie. That was sort of a fantasy camp, going out and be a cattle rancher for a week, right?
Yeah.
And he came back just happy about life again. That's what this does. So you're doing something that you thought you could never do, and you just have an incredible time. You meet great people from all over the country. You meet your heroes, and you just get happy. So for anybody if they need that or want that, be selfish, scrape the money together, go do it. So my question to you is, what fantasy camp would you do, John Knowles?
I don't know. I don't think. Let me say it this way. I don't think I've got that gene in me that says I want to go do this for anything. I love music. I play guitar. Mm-hmm. I thought maybe I'd always want to. I wish I could be in a band. And maybe when I was 18 to 20 years old, I thought, man, maybe I can get in a band and be real famous. Doesn't appeal to me. I'm in a band today. We play around here. I live my rock and roll dreams with 4 friends of mine, and we bang out a lot of great tunes and have some fun. That's good enough for me. I really just kind of live my life like, if I want to do something, I just try to figure out a way to do it. This podcast is exemplification of that. I listen to them all the time, and I thought, you know what, I could probably do that. So you know what, you scrape a few bucks together. I got some equipment. I don't have much money in this whole thing. You figure out how to do it, and you just do it.
So you're maybe different than a lot of folks. You're living the fantasy. So if you say, hey, this sounds fun, I'm just going to do it. And you got a great studio here. You got equipment that most people don't have. It's cool that you're living the dream.
I guess my life is my dream.
That's great. For all of us that maybe have sold out, that you got to take a week and go like spend some of that money to live the fantasy. Great, but if they could be like you, man, that is the fantasy.
Well, I guess I live inside my own fantasy in my head. I guess that's what it is. Because I mean, even as you're talking about the whole experience at fantasy camp, I know I've told you this before. I have no desire to do that, but I love listening to you talk about it because I see how excited you get. I get so much reward out just listening to you have that much fun.
And I think that's the sweetness, if that's the word, of the camp idea is the pros said exactly what you just said, that they like seeing the campers having fun. It's maybe a parent to a child type of thing. You love seeing your kids having fun. I love seeing the first-timers having a great time. So it's just you enjoy the people around you having a good time. And at fantasy camp, there's no hierarchy. There's no status. And so everyone's just enjoying the fact that they're meeting other people that are having. You don't even know what they do for a living. I mean, people don't care. You're just playing ball together. So if you can find that in your life, it's a fantasy camp. If it's living the life the way you do, just enjoying the people around you are having fun. It makes life a great time. I do want to give you one thing before I go. So one of the things they give us is baseball cards.
Oh yeah.
So I brought you the first 2 years baseball cards, and I signed one for you.
Oh.
Now I don't have the third year because they haven't sent them out yet. But so you get baseball cards from me, and I will say there's only 50 of these in the universe. So you have one of the 50 cards. So if you put it on eBay, make sure you tell them that it's one of 50. The other thing I'll say is I think I have 47 of them still at home because I'm not sure what adult gives out baseball cards of themselves to anyone else other than like your nephew and your parents, which are where the other two have gone.
That's awesome. So you know what, Tim? Would you, if I ran a contest on the website, could we get some signed cards to give away?
Sure. Yeah.
Yeah.
Whatever people want. I can put a little personal note on there. I'm not sure it's going to be a real popular contest.
You never know.
Well, when I was a kid, people said I looked a little bit like Tom Bernansky, who played for the Cards a little.
Yeah.
So if you want me to sign a Tom Bernansky, that's fine. I'd be happy to do that.
Did you learn how to play baseball from those commercials? What was the commercials on ESPN all the time? Was that Tom
the
and
Fred
Mansky?
McGriff ones? Tom and Mansky.
Was that Tom and Mansky?
Yeah.
You looked like that Tom and Mansky?
No, there was a Tom Brunansky.
Oh, Brunansky.
He might not have played for the Cards. He played for the Twins. I think he might have played for the Cards, but no, Tom Emansky would teach you how to throw a ball into a trash can from center field.
That's the only way you can be a center fielder is if you can chuck a ball into a trash can from center field.
So, yeah, I guess I could write on there, I learned all this from the center field trash can guy.
From the Crime Dog.
From Fred McGriff.
That's right. That's awesome. Good. I know you all remember that commercial. That was a great commercial that ran literally forever on ESPN. It probably
I think it's still going.
Airs,
yeah, there's still that kid turning the double play that he's probably in his 40s now.
Exactly. But, baseball is timeless.
It is timeless.
That is really how it works there, man. Before you go, I want to start something new. I wish I would have done this when I started the podcast, but I think this is not necessarily about baseball or Cubs fantasy camp, but it's more like let's get to know Tim Boostrom a little bit. So Tim, what was your first job?
Well, first job was a paper boy.
You're a paper boy.
Yeah, riding around on the bike, throwing the papers.
How much do you make?
Man, couple bucks.
Bucks.
You'd end up Christmas time. You get a $5 from the old lady, down the road. And that was big money.
Yeah, you didn't chuck them on any roofs, did you?
No, I'd put them right in the mailbox if people wanted it.
You had a good arm.
Yeah, I had a good arm.
You weren't good enough for high school baseball, but you were good enough for the paper route.
I could chuck a paper. That's right.
And Ryne Sandberg would have said fist pump. Good job.
Great paper throwing.
What CD is in your car stereo right now?
So since we don't have CDs, I'd say if I was going to take a CD and put it in a fictitious car stereo, it'd probably be Ray Charles.
Ray Charles? That's a good guess.
Maybe Stevie Wonder.
That's not bad. I got superstition.
Yeah, I love that stuff. Yeah, absolutely.
Right it on the wall.
And just like fantasy camp, it sounds really good in your head when you're singing it, but don't let anybody else hear you.
That's true. This is true. What's the most embarrassing app you have on your phone that you would like, I hope nobody sees that I have that app?
App on my phone.
And it could be something simple. I hope it's not like Tinder or something.
I fly around a lot for a living, and I always notice guys my age and older that have their iPads out and they're playing Candy Crush or something for like 2 hours on the plane. And I always wonder, like, do you realize other people might know you and you're playing Candy Crush for 2 hours?
Yeah.
So that to me seems a little embarrassing, and I don't have that, but I do have games on my phone. So I have like a baseball game and a basketball game. So I'd probably say those games.
I would have said McDonald's, but that's okay.
There's a McDonald's app?
Yeah, you get it's like you can join the coffee club, man.
Yeah, no, I don't have that. Is that your most embarrassing app?
Probably.
The McDonald's app.
Yeah, because I'm a fat guy.
That's why it's embarrassing.
And I thought there was a McRib tracker as part of it, but there's not. So.
Now, if there is, you let me know because I do love the McRib, and I will download it.
What was your favorite Christmas gift you ever got as a kid?
So this just popped off the top of my head. Favorite gift, we got a train set one year, and it was running around the bottom of the train, tree, and it's like right out of a movie, and I loved that thing. Just loved it. And I don't even know why, because it was literally just in a circle. You just turn it on and off. But that was a cool gift.
Well, when you get a train set when you're a kid, it's not what the train does. It's where you imagine the train is going. You saw in your head the little town around it and the crossing, and then probably within the first hour, you tried to figure out how to crash it into something.
Yes, definitely. I'd take no more was it a loop. It was a straight line, and it would run into the fireplace or whatever. Yeah,
that's awesome. Mm-hmm. All right, final question. What TV show would Tim Boostrom be a character in?
So it would definitely be The Big Bang Theory.
Okay.
The reason for that is both my wife and I have physics degrees, which neither one of us used them. But when that show the pilot first happened, we'd heard about it before it came on. And so we've seen every episode of the show because the folks in that show we went to college with. I mean, not literally, but exactly what they're talking about, the games they play, their whole lifestyle. Mm-hmm. I could definitely be a consultant on the show, but I think I could be one of the more... let's call it the straight physics guy on there, not maybe like goofy one.
Not like Will Wheaton.
No, because he's like a celebrity, right?
Yeah.
So I'm probably closer to Sheldon than I am anybody else on there. Maybe a mix between Sheldon and Leonard because I'm pretty straightforward, but don't have quite the genius of either one of those guys.
That's a good answer. Big Bang Theory. I like that.
Yeah, Big Bang Theory.
Yeah. Tim, can't thank you enough for coming down and being on the pod. This was great conversation, certainly, hearing about all the things you go and do on an annual basis, living out your baseball fantasies, man. Thanks a lot.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, this is definitely the next fantasy I was hoping to have. This moment right here, where we got to talk in your garage for the last several minutes, it's been a dream come true.
Well, there you go.
I mean, because you're going to be a star someday.
I got baseball cards.
You have baseball cards from me. I have this moment to remember forever.
Yeah, we'll take a selfie later.
It's incredible.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks a lot, buddy. I really appreciate you coming down.
All right, thank you.
So boom, Tim Boostrom. Wasn't that good? Cubs baseball fantasy camper. There's probably some of you out there that thought maybe that's something you'd want to try at some point in your life, and hopefully you take this story that Tim told and go, you know what, something I want to do. Something that I'd like to try, or maybe you look at it and go, well, that's something that's really not for me. The baseball stories he told were good in terms of what happens on the field. The stuff behind the scenes is still kicking me right in the rear end. Really funny stuff. I want to thank Tim a lot for doing that. I wanted to end today's discussion with another friend of mine that's visited all 32 Major League Baseball parks, but couldn't connect with him on the phone, and I think we've ran out of time. So, Greg Shively, we'll try to catch you next time. This has been the What's That Like podcast with your host, John Knowles. I'll see you next time. Thanks a lot. Peace out. What's That Like is available in the iTunes and Google Play stores. Search for What's That Like. Subscribe today and never miss an episode. Streaming is available at SoundCloud.com and on the SoundCloud app. Follow What's That Like at Facebook.com/What's That Like podcast and on Twitter at What's That Like Pod. All opinions of the guests of the What's That Like podcast are their own, not necessarily the views of the host or the podcast producers. We hope you enjoy this podcast serving Central Illinois and beyond. Peace out! You know, here's a story. You and I have known each other. God, we used to work together about...
We still work together, but not in
we're
the
at the same place.
Right. Same company.
We're in the same company, but we actually sat right next to each other for a long time. And I'll never forget this story. You got a voicemail on your phone one time.
I did.
What did that voicemail? You pick up your phone.
This was, 10 years ago?
Probably longer than that.
So out of nowhere.
It's got to be 15.
I get this phone call out of nowhere, a number I don't recognize, so I let it go to voicemail. And I play the voicemail, and it's, you probably remember better than I do, but it basically said, "Hey, Scoop, I got your stuff." call me back. And left the phone number. So I don't know what the stuff was. And evidently I'm Scoop. I don't know what this guy's name was, but I bet it was equally as awesome.
I thought, I remember it. That was like, yo, man, Scoop.
Yeah.
I got that bleep.
I got your stuff. No, he said stuff, I think, but maybe that's just in my head. But he says, hey, yo, Scoop, I got your stuff. Hit me up or call me up. And I kind of kicked myself that I didn't call him. I could have made a friend. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, right. Reached out.
Yeah, because it could have been like, he's like, I picked up the wheat checks that you needed, or whatever. And that
exactly.
I like wheat checks. We could have become friends.
You could have became friends.
I kind of like the nickname Scoop, too. It never caught on.
Well,
I told that story hundreds of times, and I'm still Tim.
I called you Scoop for a while, just for the hell of it.
I just don't look like a Scoop,
You don't look like a Scoop.
No,
you don't. You don't.